book discussion, The River is Waiting, a novel by Wally Lamb. This is a beautiful novel. This is a very nice written piece, a story about a man gets married, has a tragedy, ends up in prison, and tries to find his way back to life. He has addiction problems. He is an alcoholic. He is addicted to pills. And the tragedy happens because of negligence on his part because he was an addict. And the solution to his problem is to find through brutal honesty a path to recovery. And I think that would be the first thing that this book resonates with me is the first reason why this book so resonates with me. It's a really good way to show the reader what it means to come back and restore a life. And I think Wally does a great job in doing this through the story. So this is not a self-help book or, find your way or be true to yourself or any of these platitudes. It's just a simple story about a man who is fighting tooth and nail as hard as he can to come back to a life that he dreams about, that he wants to have. And I think that to me is the most valuable thing about this novel, that Lamb is not giving you platitudes here. It's not a self-help book about, or the big book like in the actual novel they talk about the big book, which is some sort of Bible of addicts, of how they're supposed to come back from a bad situation into a good situation. This is just a boy, a guy. I mean, he's probably in his 30s, so he's a bit older, who has a bad life. I mean, things happen to him, and there's a reason why these things happen to him, and he faces them, he confronts them. And I think that's very beautiful about this novel. The second thing I want to talk about is actually the flip side of this, which is, and I don't know if the author Lamb did this on purpose, but to me, he lets, like, it's a very positive story for a long time. The end is a little bit tragic, to be honest, but for a long time, it's a positive story. It's an anti-hero story where you root for the guy, you want him to succeed, but you also feel that it's never going to happen. And I think the author does a good job in encapsulating the main character into this world of trouble and this hopeful trajectory towards a better life. But then you see the underlying cause of his problems, which is, one, he's a weak person, and second, he's self-righteous. And those are the two things that I think, as a person, no matter in what situation you are, even if you're not an addict, you don't need to be in prison, you don't need to have a tragedy in your life to realize that those are two difficult situations to deal with. And you don't want to be in a situation like that. You don't want to be self-righteous, and you don't want to be weak. Because if you are, and I think you can be weak and you can be self-righteous, but the combination is very dangerous. And I think that is the underlying cause for this particular story, why Corby Letberger actually, in my opinion, has never had a chance. Now, the storyline is a little bit tragic. There's, of course, it's a novel, so there's drama in it and all that, but you can extrapolate from that. Self-righteousness and weakness together are very difficult, and I think that is the main problem, in my opinion, in this novel. The third thing I want to say, and I want to come back, it's related to the first thing, which is sort of the path back towards a life after you had a tragedy, and that is honesty. I think Wally Lamb, the author, emphasizes honesty a lot here, and I think it's important. And again, this doesn't just apply to people who are in a tough spot in life or anything like that. this applies to everybody. Like if you're not honest to yourself, if you're not brutally honest about what it is you're trying to achieve, how you're achieving it, what are the shortcuts, it's okay to take shortcuts, but be honest about them. I think brutal honesty is absolutely key in life. It's absolutely key also in this novel, and I think that's why, in my opinion, this novel has a pretty high standard for me. This is more than just a story. I would call this literature. This is literature. This is the human condition. Yeah, it's contemporary. There's mentions of Donald Trump and COVID, and there's definitely a political message here. And I want to extrapolate. I don't even care. I'm not going to get into that. And it's okay if the author has the urge to express his political views. It's not a central part of the. It's definitely not a central part of the story. However, what is central to the story, and this maybe related a little bit to the politics of the story, and that is the question of justice. The question of justice and the question of punishment. This is a big chunk of the novel is a prison story. So we're talking about prison here. We're talking about punishment. We're talking about sentencing people to prison terms and all that kind of stuff. And the question, of course, throughout the novel is prevalent, which is, do you deserve to be punished? And I think, to me, this is the one thing where the novel definitely falls short, and that is, it's a bit constructed or convoluted. This person did not have to go to prison. I think it makes no sense for this person to go to prison. And by the way, this is not a legal opinion of mine. It's simply a circumstantial opinion. There was a way for him to avoid prison, and he didn't avoid it. So it reminds me a bit of A Man Half Full. There's a scene in The Man Half Full where one of the protagonists also doesn't want to lie, or is trying to sort of stand on the on the moral high ground, and ends up in prison. And I think that's not necessary. Like the price that Corby pays for this moral high ground that he's stepping on, for whatever reason, in my opinion, is a way, way too high price. He's in prison with murderers, with human traffickers, with real thugs. He's not a thug. So he's hurting his life. He's hurting, his kid, his child, a lot more by, having that moral high. I think it goes back to that self-righteousness. Like there seems to be a theme in this book that this person, just because he stepped on that moral high ground, for some reason he deserves better treatment. And that's not okay. That is not justice. And I think this goes back to a political question, in my opinion, which is that perpetrators are perpetrators. Yes, we can treat them humanely. Of course, we shouldn't be savages, but we should never forget that they're perpetrators. And there's a scene in this book that bothers me a lot, which is that, when this particular protagonist sort of gets almost a free pass because he's an artist. And, he then gets mistreated in prison for that. And I think that is a natural reaction. Not that I would do that, something bad to a person, but I would also be, in plain English, pissed off if my bunkie or my cellmate or whatever gets special treatment just because he's a nice looking artist or something like that. Look, you're in prison. Whatever reason you are here, and you should not have special treatment. And I think there is this, and that's the only political thing I want to say. I think Wally Lamb has a different political view. I would think that he's the kind of person that approves of that. He believes in rehabilitation. He believes in giving a second chance. So do I. But what I don't believe in is to give people special treatment, and particularly not based on some sort of identity. And it comes across here. We're talking about Black people. We're talking about gay people, and those are people that for some reason you almost feel like the author is trying to seep through that maybe they should get special treatment. I don't know if that's what the author's intention is, but it comes across, or maybe it's just because it's framed in this context and in today's time, we are conditioned by this. But that's definitely wrong, and I think things go wrong also in the novel, particularly because again, Corby Ledberger uh, almost feels like he has a special treatment here or some sort of special pass towards life that indemnifies him from certain things. Last thing I want to say in this novel, it's about doing the right thing. And I don't mean doing the right thing in a moral sense, doing the right thing in a practical sense, in a sort of, listen, in this particular case, there was a situation, something bad happened, and what should have happened is that Corby and his wife divorce and go different paths. Keeping something together just because you've been together for a while, or just because you have children together, or just because one of them sort of can't let loose, is the wrong thing, and it leads to bad outcomes. And eventually, in the end, things fall into place, but a little bit in a tragic way. And I think it would have been much better if, of course, there would not have been a novel then, but my point is, for real life, it would be much more advisable that you cut your losses when you see that something is not working properly, when you have to fight tooth and nail to keep a relationship intact, then that's probably the time when you should move on and do something else. And I think this is a good example. This novel is a very good example of how these things can go wrong when you keep, trying to, what's the word, square the circle or something like that. It just doesn't fit, right? And I think this in this case. So anyway, to summarize, I think The River is Waiting. It's a phenomenal novel. I'd highly recommend it. I think it's a simple novel in the sense that it's not like the most sophisticated prose or anything like that. It's basic stuff. I would say Tom Wolfe stuff. I liked it a lot. I like Tom Wolfe. I like this type of writing, which is down to earth, contemporary, but it has depth. This, to me, is literature. It's more than just a story you read in the airport or something like that. It's more than that. Definitely more than that. And I would say kudos to the author. It gives you a very good sense for what rehabilitation means. It gives you a very good sense for what it means to come back in life. It doesn't have to be a tragic story, but like just what it means to be given a second chance and how you tackle it. And it starts with honesty and it ends with honesty. And I think, like I said, one of the things that you have to be very conscious about is that self-righteousness and weakness are two dangerous companions. You can be weak, but then don't be self-righteous. You can be self-righteous, but then you better not be weak. A combination of that leads to bad outcomes. But I think, again, finally, I would say what's encouraging about the story is that you can do it. You can come back. And even if you don't come back, that there's always hope in life. This is Pascal's wager. Like, no matter what, you're better off having hope in life than to be desperate. Thank you.